My name is Kathleen Sexton. I'm the program manager at the Clinton River Watershed Council, and we are part of the grant that the City of Royal Oak has received. It's a 319 grant from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, focusing on non-point source pollution and mitigation of that. And as part of that, Royal Oak has started a rain garden program, and we fulfill the education component. So I'm here to talk to you guys today. A little bit of background about the Clinton River watershed. That's where we are right now. That's where we all live. I mean, if you live in Royal Oak, you live in the Clinton River watershed. You can take a look at this map over here if you need a better idea of the area of the watershed. And then the Michigan map just kind of gives a general idea of watersheds in Michigan and the Great Lakes. So I'll talk to you guys a little bit about that, and then we'll dive into rain gardens, their functions, benefits, a quick tutorial about if you wanted to design and install a rain garden, and some examples of rain gardens, including the existing rain gardens in Royal Oak and the ones that were just recently built on 4th Street near Vermont. So it's like between Blair and Connecticut. There were 4 just recently put in there. So, and after the presentation, if you guys are willing to take a venture outside with us, we will be doing an on-site tour of those rain gardens as well. We have Julie Lyons-Bricker here from the city. Ann Brazy is also the executive director at the Clinton River Watershed Council. And then Holly, I can't remember her last name right now, but she's awesome. She's the one of the engineers from Royal Oak that was instrumental in the installation of those rain gardens. So does anybody have any questions so far?
Could you practice the middle line?
Yep, of course, I can do that. And then also we do have a sign-in sheet, so if you didn't sign in yet, please do that. If you need to go to the bathroom, I don't mind if you get up or do whatever. So, and feel free to raise your hand and ask questions as we go along. So we'll get started here. So just a little bit of background about the Clinton River Watershed Council. Our mission is to protect, enhance, and celebrate the Clinton River, its watershed, and Lake St. Clair. And these are both photos of the Clinton River, obviously. We're a nonprofit organization, so we're supported primarily by grants, individual and community memberships, and donations. We have 6 full-time employees right now, working in 3 main program areas of education, stewardship, and watershed management. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what a watershed is. So I'm going to ask somebody from the audience to volunteer to give me an answer. What is a watershed? What do you think a watershed is? Any guesses as to a definition? Okay, you guys are shy. So it's generally, it's the entire geographic region that drains into a central location. And so as you see on this map over here and on the previous map, it's all the lakes, streams, tributaries that drain to a central point and then out into a larger body of water. So for example, the Clinton River and all its tributaries, eventually the main branch drains into Lake St. Clair and Harrison Township. And they're separated by topographic divides. So everywhere in the world is a watershed. No matter where you're standing, you're in a watershed. Even if you're in the middle of Africa, if a raindrop falls there, it's going to eventually drain to somewhere. So there's a little bit of a definition about that. This is some more information about the Clinton River watershed specifically. It covers approximately 760 square miles in 4 southeast Michigan counties. The river and its tributaries flow through 72 rural, suburban, and urban communities with a total population of more than 1.5 million. So we are the most populous watershed in the state. The headwaters are located in Springfield and Independence Township, and then eventually it flows out into Lake St. Clair and Harrison Township. There's also 7 sub-watersheds, and then the Anchor Bay watershed and direct drainage. So these drain into Lake St. Clair directly. They're not part of the larger Clinton River watershed, but we still have membership communities in those sub-watersheds. Just a little bit of interesting facts about the Great Lakes region. We all live in Michigan, I'm assuming. So most people that live here have a deep appreciation for our water resources, and that's part of why we're doing this, the rain gardens, and why I have a job. So the Great Lakes Basin holds about 6 quadrillion gallons of water. For me, I can't picture what 6 quadrillion is, but I like to think of that as if you dumped all that water out, it would cover the contiguous United States, so everything besides Hawaii and Alaska, with 9.5 feet of water. So it's quite a lot. It's 20% of the world's available freshwater, and it's 90% of the freshwater available in the United States. So we kind of have a big responsibility there to take care of it. We also have the second most shoreline after Alaska. We have more shoreline than Florida and California combined, with 3,288 miles of shoreline, and it's all freshwater coast. It's 94,000 square miles of water, draining twice as much square miles of land. This is all known as the Great Lakes Basin. And it's very essential to Michigan in terms of our economy. So clean drinking water, recreation, fishing. We have the second largest marine industry in the country. And just our sense of place, our sense of home. Water is super important to Michiganders. So historically, water quality issues previous to the passing of the Clean Water Act in 1972 had to do with industry. Primarily now, since industry is regulated, the point source pollution is regulated, our issues come from non-point source pollution. So that would be bacterial contamination from septic systems, failing septic systems, and sewer overflows, some persistence in the contaminated sediments that we haven't mitigated yet. But the greatest source of impairments and pollution in the Clinton River right now is stormwater pollution. So stormwater is the water that runs off of all of our impervious surfaces in our watershed. So rooftops, roads, parking lots, driveways, sidewalks, and mowed lawns. And why is stormwater a problem? Does anybody have an idea?
Salt.
Salt, dirt, exactly. Those are all contaminants.
Car oil.
Oil, grease,
Fertilizer.
fertilizer. Yep, you guys hit the nail right on the head. So this is an example of how stormwater impairs our waterways. So when it rains or snows, all of that precipitation runs across impervious surfaces and picks up these pollutants like fertilizer, pesticides, animal waste, cropland waste, dirt from construction, because sedimentation is an issue in terms of like aquatic habitat and things like that, and runs into the storm drain. And 95% of the storm drains aren't filtered before they enter our waterways. So all of this discharge goes directly into the river or its tributaries, and eventually goes out into Lake St. Clair, which results in water quality problems and impairment of aesthetic and recreational values. So once again, as I said before, we have 72 communities. It's highly urbanized, especially in the southern region of the Clinton River watershed. There's thousands of storm drains, 1.5 million people, which ultimately means millions of gallons of stormwater going into the watershed and Lake St. Clair whenever it rains. These are some of the effects of stormwater: flooding, property damage. I don't know if you guys lived here in 2014, but you probably had some pretty direct effects of stormwater in that time. So it can be dangerous and it can be costly, and it can turn a healthy river into an unhealthy river. So how can rain gardens help? Rain gardens provide a way for individual property owners to be part of the solution to stormwater and to excess stormwater. So what they do is, it's a depression in the landscape that's designed and planted to trap, absorb, and filter stormwater runoff and improve water quality. So a rain garden creates a bioretention area which collects runoff, it filters out pollutants, it slowly absorbs water instead of this water directly running off into storm drains. You're essentially creating a mini wetland that, natural wetlands and natural forests do this on their own. Since we have so many paved surfaces, you're creating, a small portion of that in your own backyard or front yard, wherever, or in the medians on 4th Street. They are designed to be dry within 48 hours of a major rainfall, and this here is an example of a residential garden. So sink it, slow down the water coming from your downspout or your roof and sink it into the ground, allow it to infiltrate and recharge the groundwater. One of the things that rain gardens do that I like to emphasize is capturing the first flush. So the first flush is the initial pulse of storm water from an event. Let's say it's a 1-inch storm. It contains high concentrations of the pollutants. It flows directly into surface waters untreated. And if each individual property owner installed a rain garden, it would intercept and slow down this first flush of storm water, remove the pollutants, and it would lower the infrastructure development and maintenance costs of stormwater infrastructure, which is very expensive. And a lot of cities in Michigan and overall, counties, a lot of the infrastructure is getting to the point where it needs to be replaced. So we're encouraging cities like Royal Oak to incorporate green infrastructure when they're doing that management. So some of the basic functions of a rain garden, as I've said before, they intercept and filter stormwater runoff, settling and filtration of pollutants via adsorption and volatilization of the chemical reactions in the soil. So they actually break them down and turn them into specific, chemical compounds, so they're not really toxic anymore. Plant uptake of excess nutrients. So if you have fertilizer and pesticide runoff that goes into a garden, the plants are going to be able to use that to grow, and instead of it running off into rivers and creating issues with algae and excess plant growth there. And slow release of water, so recharging of groundwater. So this is an example here of a downspout water going through, like a lot of times people will put gravel and things where the water's going to flow in to decrease erosion. And it's filtered and then it goes into, this was from Seattle, Puget Sound, versus running off of a driveway, going directly into the storm drain, and then going right into Puget Sound. So some of the benefits of rain gardens that will be provided: they restore the natural hydrology of a watershed. They can reduce erosion in the streams and tributaries of the Clinton River from excess flash flooding water coming down the river. They reduce pollution by trapping and filtering water, recharge groundwater, provide wildlife habitat. So using native plants provides habitats for birds, butterflies, bees, and other pollinators. It increases the amount of pervious surfaces in the watershed. It enhances beauty, so it increases curb appeal, sense of place, your property value. It builds community. A lot of times, one of our partner organizations, Friends of the Rouge, they have almost like a buy-in to their rain garden program. And so if you want a rain garden installed, you have to help install, a number of other rain gardens, whether it's 6 to 10. So you're building community there. And then, people have said that this has changed their life. They'll sit outside, they'll have coffee, tea, some drinks, if it's a nice summer day, with their friends that they've helped, install these amazing gardens with. And they're also serving a actual stormwater function as well, in addition to the community building and increasing of property value. And it's just a fun tool for learning. So if you like to dabble in gardening, but you want to do something different, this is a great opportunity to teach yourself how to do something a little more. So in terms of deciding the best spot to locate your rain garden, it should be at least 10 feet away from your foundation. You can integrate it with your current landscaping. It doesn't have to just stick out and be like its own little thing. Sunny or partly sunny locations are the best, but it is possible to do a shade garden if that's all you have available. Make sure you're checking the soil. It needs to drain. And flatter sites are better. Less than a 12% slope. If you have a very steep slope, greater than 12%, we suggest just trying to find a different location. And definitely don't locate it over a septic system or a sewer. This is a really common question from people. Will a rain garden encourage mosquitoes? They will not. A properly designed and constructed rain garden should be dry within 48 hours. And mosquitoes need 7 to 10 days to mature into adults. So that's not enough time for them to actually set up shop in your garden and start reproducing or breeding. So how big should your rain garden be? Well, you need to determine your soil type and relate it to the area of your roof or lawn that will drain into the rain garden. So in terms of size, really any size is going to provide some benefit. But we suggest, starting at the smallest, 70 square feet to up to 300 square feet. The rain gardens on 4th Street are actually 3,000 square feet each, and there's 4, so they're pretty large. But in terms of a residential garden, you don't need to get super big. So 3 key questions that you want to ask if you decide that you want to build a rain garden. What is the size of your drainage area? A lot of times that's looking at your roof. How deep should your rain garden be, and what type of soil do you have? So if you guys are taking notes, write these down. So there's all kinds of calculations in terms of calculating drainage area. You don't need to get super specific, really looking at the size of your roof. If it's not an exact rectangle, you can just estimate it. It doesn't need to be an exact science, but this is a really rudimentary way to look at it. Length times width, you get your square feet, and then you divide your square feet by the number of downspouts that you have. So then you look at what, each downspout, how much square feet that's draining. So this is an example of a roof that's 100 by 20 feet. It's 2,000 square feet. There's 4 downspouts on that roof, and so each downspout is draining approximately 500 square feet. This is looking at the slope versus depth. So looking at what kind of slope that you have in your yard, and then how deep your rain garden should be according to that slope. So if it's pretty flat, less than 4%, 3 to 5 inches deep will suffice. If it's slightly angled, so 5 to 7%, 6 to 7 inches deep is recommended. If it's a steep angle, so 8 to 12%, we're guessing you need about 8 inches of depth to your rain garden. And if it's greater than 12% of a slope, we suggest finding another site. These are just suggestions. You're willing to try anything, but if you're going to spend time and money installing a rain garden, these are definitely good guidelines to go by. So this is just an example of some different rain gardens. This one's a little bit close to the house. This one's it's farther away. It's a better design. They both are adjacent to the downspout, which if you have, we try to look at a depression in your yard. That's the best place to put them, the lowest area in your yard. If that's nowhere near a downspout, there's really easy ways to direct the water to your rain garden. You could even dig like a small channel and put pea gravel or bigger pieces of gravel in there. You could extend your downspout. That's not always really, doesn't look great, but there are ways to direct the water to your rain garden if it's nowhere near a downspout. So the importance of soil type and paying attention to what soil that you have, basically you need to make sure that it drains. Most of Royal Oak is clay, so that's not really good at draining. When they installed the rain gardens on 4th Street, they actually dug about 12 inches, was it 12 or 6 inches, or 15?
I think they're 15 inches.
15 inches below the recommended depth, and then they backfilled that with pervious soil, because it is pretty clayey. So that's something that you want to take into account when you're doing this. If you find that you just have clay in your backyard, you may want to plan for digging a little bit deeper and backfilling with some better draining soil. So the sandy soil infiltrates the fastest, which if you have all sand, that's also not great either. You really want to have a middle, like loamy, silty mixture for a rain garden. So infiltration rate of sandy soils is about 2.5 inches per hour. Silty soil is 1/2 inch per hour, and clay is about 1/4 inch per hour. So like it says here, you may require a gravel bottom or other means of infiltration below your plants if you have clay soils. Like I said, I suggest just backfilling it with composty soil. Before you dig, you want to call misdig. I'm sure you guys have all seen all those flags out. They delineate the utilities. There is a long number, but really you can just dial 811 and that'll get you to where you need to be in terms of your locality and finding somebody to come out and do the delineation for you to help you avoid any underground utilities or cable lines or anything like that. You don't want to plan, your perfect rain garden and then all of a sudden dig down and hit some line that you can't put plants on top of. In terms of selecting plants, you need a variety of plants, some that are water tolerant and some that are drought tolerant. And so in the inside of your rain garden, you're going to have things that like wet feet. On the outside of the berm, you want things that like to have drier soils. So depending on the design, you may want some small rocks to slow the flow and prevent erosion. That's just in terms of like the entry into your rain garden. So you will have a berm around it and then plants designed inside. There's different ways to do it. Sometimes people do it in zones, like zone 3, 2, and 1. So zone 3 is going to be drier. Zone 2 will be plants that can tolerate wet and dry, and zone 1 will be pretty much wetland plants. That'll be in the middle. So deciding how many plants you need, That's based on the size of plants that you're going to purchase. If you're just going to do seeds, if you're going to do plugs, if you're going to do mature plants in a pot, and the shape of the plant and how it's going to grow. What you're looking for, really. So if you like lots of green, if you like lots of color. The type of plant, so grasses and sedges are planted much closer together than shrubs and other herbs. Herbaceous plants are just wildflowers, basically. And if you're interested in more of a manicured look versus a wild look, I've seen a lot of rain gardens that don't look that much different than the little flower beds that people put around their home, you know. And once you've installed the rain garden, the amount of maintenance involved is very similar once it's established to a regular, you know, landscaped yard. So some of the values of using native plants versus non-native plants, they have deeper roots, so they're able to absorb more water, and they're also able to survive longer in drought because their roots go farther down, they can get to that groundwater. You don't need any fertilizer or pesticides usually because these plants are adapted to Michigan's native environmental conditions. The maintenance, like I said, is similar to other landscaped gardens that you've got in your yard, if you do already. And it doesn't require watering in droughts after they're established. So here is a quick little figure on, you know, what absorbs stormwater poorly versus well. So obviously concrete and asphalt and other impervious surfaces are going to be at the end of really not absorbing anything. Poorly managed turf or lawn, so if you cut your yard really, really close, if it's poor soil, if it's cracked soil, I mean, especially during drought, if it rains, it's not really going to infiltrate that well into that lawn. It's going to run right off, just like if it were a driveway. Healthy turf or lawn can still be beneficial in terms of absorbing some stormwater, but a lot of times they are fertilized, so you have that element as well. Healthy shrubs, flowers, and trees, and then native plants like herbaceous wildflowers and things like that, they are going to be better at absorbing and filtering stormwater.
Where can you find native plants? Because even at the stores around here, they don't really carry native plants. So where can you buy them?
There are several native plant nurseries around. I can't think of any of the names right now, but we can get you guys that information. And a lot of times, if you go into those stores, you can just ask. They might even have a really small, usually smaller, native plant section. And I don't know, are there any resources on the website in terms of native plant nurseries? Okay. Well, they do exist in Michigan. I know there's one in Pontiac. I don't know the name. Yeah?
The wild type nursery is in Mason, Michigan, which
Okay.
is not close by, but you can go online. They do have a catalog.
Yeah.
There's also a gentleman who is at the Royal Oak Farmers Market, not every week, but
Okay.
periodically. He also sells native plants.
Okay.
I think his business is called Plants for Ecology.
Okay. Yeah, we actually just did a stream bank planting, and we ordered a bunch of plants from Wild Type, and they actually will deliver if you want. There's also a lot of nurseries if you want to purchase seeds and things like that. I know Prairie Moon Nursery is an excellent resource. They're based out of Minnesota, but they ship all over. So there are a lot of resources out there. Yep.
It is Plants for Ecology, and his name is Brendan Nolan.
Okay.
His website has all of his plants, and he is local. He's in Troy.
Yeah.
Very good seller. My one suggestion, though, if you're going to go to a place like Home Depot or Lowe's for plants, make sure they don't use the neonicotinoids
Yeah.
on the plants, because then you're defeating your purpose. Because if you buy a plant with neonicotinoids, it's going to kill your bees and your pollinators. So you got to be very, very careful that you get plants that aren't treated. There's an awesome greenhouse called Beeson's. It's in Livonia, but they have a huge supply of pollinator plants too.
Okay.
Butterflies, and they have a huge butterfly garden too, or a butterfly house.
Okay.
So they sell all the milkweed types and everything. So
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I know I've been in contact with somebody at the beginning, like a couple months ago. We're going to be doing a native plant sale next spring. So stay tuned, and you guys could attend to that. We're also looking for volunteers to help with that, so if you're interested.
John Delisle, he's in West Bloomfield. He's spoken for us several times, but he sells native plants, and he also he's an expert at like landscaping your area, so knows what will go where too.
Nice. Yeah, there are, we also have several resources of, designing rain gardens and things like that. There's a man, I don't remember what his name is right now, but it's called Inhabitect. It's based out of Traverse City, but he can provide recommendations to anybody who, like anywhere in Michigan. And he's an expert in terms of like green roofs and rain gardens and other green infrastructure design. So, Inhabitect, so TECT. So here's some examples of native plants that you could use. This is cardinal flower, so a lobelia. This is arrow, a rum, pickerel weed. So these are going to be all wetland plants right here. This is Jack in the Pulpit. I've never seen that in a rain garden. I'm not really sure why it's on this slide, but it's a nice wildflower to find in the woods. This looks like some type of willow, and this is Joe Pieweed. So this could be one that's either a drier or a middler one. This really can tolerate wet or dry. And some brown-eyed Susan or black-eyed Susan in the background. So these are all examples of things that you could put. A lot of things that people use anyway, like black-eyed Susan, penstemon, or foxglove, you can get the native varieties of these or irises and use them in your rain garden. So you might even have some of those plants already established in your yard that you could just transfer if they have bulbs and things like that. So in terms of attracting wildlife, certain types of plants and gardens will attract wildlife. So wet gardens, you'll have frogs and dragonflies. Nectar gardens, like pollinator gardens, butterflies and hummingbirds. And trees and shrubs, you're going to attract some songbirds. So there's a ruby-throated hummingbird, a cedar waxwing. This looks like a cricket frog, and a regular old American toad. So some steps to take when you decide that you want to build a rain garden. You can take notes on these if you want. Decide where you're going to put the garden in terms of your drainage area. Usually, like I said, the lowest spot in your yard is the optimal point. Size your garden according to the area that you're going to be draining. Create a design. Choose your plants. Lay out the garden. Do the digging. Prepare the soil. Do your planting, and then mulch, manicure, water. Make sure it's all set. Which we're in that stage with the 4th Street ones right now. They have already been planted and established. They don't look super full right now, but a lot of times you have to wait. I wish I had a before and after of, when you first plant the rain garden versus 2 or 3 years later. It's a huge difference. You don't need to make sure that it's exactly full, every inch is full when you first plant it. You're going to have some bare ground, but native plants, they'll grow, they'll fill in really well. So in terms of maintenance, weeding is always needed, even if you have, a typical landscaped yard, mowing, etc. Like I said, it's not really anymore once it's established, anything past typical garden maintenance. You need to pick out the weeds, pick out the dead stuff, maybe thin some things out. And if drainage is an issue, you need to dig a hole in the berm to allow the garden to drain. So, for example, here, excuse me, this was a poorly designed rain garden. Looks like there might be an issue with the soil types or the types of plants that they've got going there, or it's just not a large enough rain garden for the area that they're draining and the amount of water that they're draining. So the most time-consuming part will be the first couple years, but after the growing season, after the first few growing seasons, it'll be pretty well established. So the Royal Oak Rain Garden Program is something that's just been recently established. The existing rain gardens are the East 4th Street parking lot across from Grant Park, so that's near Kaiser Avenue. Eagle Plaza, the South Main Street bioswales, Vincetta Boulevard west of North Main Street, and then Warden Park in front of Tola Soccer. These are ones that have already been established. And then the 4th Street Rain Garden Project. This is 4 rain gardens that were recently installed this year. They're 250 feet by 12 feet, so about 3,000 square feet, which is pretty big. And there's 4 of those. They have the potential to capture 22,500 gallons of water during a runoff or during a 1-inch storm. because of their size. The estimated construction cost was $218,000. And like I said, this was all grant funded from a 319 non-point solution grant, which covers $184,000 of the cost, about 84%. So this is the existing rain garden near Kaiser. When we go outside, you'll see some stuff that we've observed and lessons learned in terms of the plants that are directly adjacent to the side of the road. I know that the city chose salt-tolerant plants because of the winter. You know, there's going to be a lot of salt spray on a lot of these plants. There was still some die-off on this edge, so we're wondering if that's because of the piles of snow that also get left there. So still some lessons learned in terms of installing these rain gardens here. And then these are the 4th Street rain gardens that were just newly installed. So this is a drainage basin that will collect any excess water that doesn't get absorbed. Holly has mentioned that she doubts these will ever be necessary, but this is just in case, like a 500-year storm that would flood these. The water's not going to go into the street, it'll go into here. There's downspouts or cutouts from the curb, a couple of them for a rain garden, and then some gravel to prevent erosion leading into the garden here. And then here is the planted and mulched gardens, right there. And here's the cutout.
So are the cutouts there to let road or water in from the road?
Yes. So here's some examples of different rain gardens. Parking lot bioretentions here, or gardens installed along a main street. They really can add a lot of aesthetic value to a walkway, like in downtown Royal Oak. This was, excuse me. This is an installation at a school. This was an installation at our office. I should have taken a picture of it and brought it because this is full. The plants are 3 to 4 feet tall now. Not all of them are that tall, but this was what it looked like when we first planted it, I think 2 years ago, and it's filled in really nicely. I mean, water used to pool right here all the time, and it does not pool there anymore. So Depot Park, this is a before of Depot Park in Clarkston. This is a culvert, kind of a drainage ditch here. And then here's an after they installed rain gardens. Rochester Hills Museum. This is the photos of the planting here. Great, that is all I have for you guys, so does anybody have any questions?
If I could give a public service announcement that piggybacks on to what Julie just mentioned. We have a rain garden program scheduled at the library in April, being given by Drew Lathan, who he gave a program to us not too long ago about native plants, but he's going to be talking about rain gardens, and he is the owner of Creating Sustainable Landscapes. So we will coordinate with getting that on the city's website about rain gardens, but the library, in coordination with other parts of the city, will be continuing to update you on rain gardens. And then I would like to give you a pitch that I forgot at the beginning, and all those of you who have the library's brochure, at the bottom of the first page, we have started a seed garden. So if you want to experiment with some seeds and don't feel like shelling out money at a store to buy those seeds, check our seed garden out. Some seeds are fall planting seeds, so you don't have to wait until next spring. But do check that out the next time you're in the library or today before you head out of the library. Thank you.
Yes?
Like places where you couldn't put a rain garden, but you could put plants. Would it be helpful to put those native plants that you would use in the rain garden? Would that help a little bit? Like if you have a little area that's kind of swampy near your foundation, would it improve it by putting those plants in there?
Yeah, I mean, I always encourage people to landscape with native plants versus non-native plants, especially invasive plants. So There are a lot of native plant nurseries out there. I'm sorry that I can't think of any of the names right off the top of my head, but just even, installing a pollinator garden, if you're landscaping with, wild or native plants that are for pollinators or birds or things like that, that's already an improvement versus putting, we all love hostas, but they don't really provide that much benefit to wildlife, so. Yeah, deer love them. The deer love anything. And I work in Rochester Hills, and we get people complaining all the time about the deer and how they eat everything. And I was babysitting in Rochester Hills last night, and there was 3 deer in their backyard, and I'm like, they're right. They're here eating everything. So, yeah.
I have a question. Somebody mentioned a native plant nursery in Mason. Does anybody know the name of that?
That's
Wild type?
Wild type,
Yeah.
Wild type?
yes.
Yeah. So if you wrote your email address down, that's something that I'm thinking about. We'll probably do a follow-up. Thanking you guys for attending, and then, all the suggestions that you've made and the feedback and the context. So Environmental Advisory Council, Clinton River Watershed Council, Julie, anybody that is instrumental or you can bring questions to. And we'll also get that information, like Brendan Nolan with Plants of Ecology or something like that, and then the wild type. Get those resources together for you guys, so. Yeah.
It was mentioned that the one in the booklet is, the dimensions are for like a 1-inch
Yeah.
storm, so I don't know really what generally the range is, but.
That's like I think that's, I don't know what the 100-year storm is. I think
Well, my
that's.
question is, like, if you were to build one that is bigger, or like, you made it for more space than you're supposed to, is that
Yeah.
really bad, or is it just not gonna do as well, or?
No, I think it's fine. It's just, it's going to be more costly if you're making it deeper and bigger. But it's the bigger, you can't really go too big,
Is it like
So-
a 1 inch, because it drains within an hour or two, right? So it's 1 inch per 3 hours, right?
I'm not sure. I just know that a 1-inch storm is like the 100-year storm, and that's all the calculations that I've done for this one too. So like the first flush is the first 1 inch, and so we're really just working on capturing that. But for example, the rain gardens that we're going to go take a look at, they're 3,000 square feet. That's probably designed for like, a 5-inch storm. And obviously they're not going to catch all the water in Royal Oak, but all the water that would drain into them is going to be captured and taken care of. So it's just about getting those like different gardens out in the city. And that's where you guys come in, because people own a lot of the property in Royal Oak. And so if everybody took initiative to make their own little pervious, wetland in their yard, it would create, it would help in mitigating a lot of the excess stormwater and flooding that we get, so. Yeah.
About, 15 years ago, I got tired of mowing dirt. So I dug up my whole yard and I planted, it's all flower garden.
Nice.
And then there's also this wide, I call it kind of like a fake river. I put rubber mulch in there.
Okay.
Is that, there's no indentation other than that little fake river, but, is that kind of?
That's the same idea.
Okay.
You're channeling the water.
Okay.
Rubber mulch is another thing that can be used in terms of directing water from a downspout.
Okay.
So, there's not, it's not a linear A to B. Like, that is a drainage method in terms of like different plants, different drainage in your yard. It's not necessarily a rain garden per se, but it's the same concept in terms of channeling water.
Okay.
And so I think Julie Lyons-Bricker wanted to talk a little bit more about the rain garden program for Royal Oak. She is the grants coordinator, and she's primarily the administrator for this program right now.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. We are creating a residential rain garden program. It is part of the grant funding that we got for the 4th Street. It included a portion that would be the outreach to residents, and so that's what we're working on right now. And with me, I have a do-it-yourself rain garden booklet. It includes step-by-step actions, so you can get from grass turf to a rain garden. And in the back, we also have a list of potential plants. Some of them are native, some of them are not. Having a hard time with this. And then also some invasive species pictures and lists to make sure that you don't get those in your gardens. So these are free, although we would like to track whom we are giving these to, so that when we get the program going, if there are additions, second editions, or changes that we need to make in this booklet, that you always have the most updated, and we would get in touch with you and let you know.
Does it have all the, like the suggestions and the measurements and requirements that were
It
in the
does.
PDF?
Yeah.
It goes into more detail than this presentation did, so.
Yeah, this is,
Oh,
it's
sorry.
pretty comprehensive in here.
Would you be able to post this presentation to the Romy website?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so yeah, one of the things I noticed that's different, because we now have access to Google Earth, and you can see your roof and figure out which portion is in your downspout that you may be using. For instance, I'm working on getting a rain garden built at my place, and so I just used Google Earth and took a little measurement, the 1 to 100, and kind of measured without having to do the whole roof and then dividing it into 4 quarters. And so that's how this booklet is set up, that you figure out which portion of your roof is going to be used, and then get that measurement and multiply the length and the width to come up with the square footage.
Sorry, another question. So will the city let us build these like in our front lawns or even along the easement part, or do we need a permit? Or?
You don't need a permit for your yard. If you were going to do something in the easement, and Holly can help with this, you would need a permit, but we're trying to steer people away from that, because typically under the easement there are water lines or gas lines. Do I have that right? And if they have to come in to do some kind of repair, the rain garden will be torn up and they won't put it back. So you're better off putting it in a front yard or backyard. And in this booklet we also talk about the distance from a foundation, and then also distance from your neighbor's property line. So there are some things to think about, certainly, and spending a little extra time in the beginning can be very helpful once you get started. You can take care of many potential issues by thinking about a couple of the things that are in this booklet. Okay, so as it says here, we have a web page that's set up, and at this point, it's very new. We have just the 2 events that we've done so far, including this one listed, and then save the season, because in the spring we're going to do another presentation like this at the senior center, and then we'll do an actual rain garden building demonstration. So those dates are to be determined, but we're thinking like end of March, early April, so we can get the plants in and let them experience some of the spring rain, and then start growing in the summertime. So if you're interested, keep an eye on this website. It's www.romy.gov, which is our basic Royal Oak website, and then a /rain gardens. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is about the soil in Royal Oak. So when I started working on this guidebook, there's an impression that the southern part of Royal Oak is kind of sandy. The work that's being done here, the city center, it's really sandy. And then up in the northern part of Royal Oak, it is more clayish. And I live in northern Royal Oak, and my backyard in the summertime turns into something that's akin to natural concrete. When we first moved there, we used a pickaxe to do the gardening. And so I was really surprised when I got into my front yard, and I'll back up a little bit. I did look at the soil survey, and it said my property is considered urban mixed soil, and I thought, what is that? And I think what it is, and I don't know if somebody can help me, is just a bunch of things that were put there. So it's not natural at all anymore, because those neighborhoods were bulldozed and then backfilled and then loaded up and built on, and sometimes we find bricks underneath, so we know that it's a mix, for sure. But anyway, I was really surprised. In my front yard, we did the digging suggestion that's in here. We used a post-hole digger, and we went down 20 inches and filled it with water and let that drain so the soil around it would be relatively moist. And then we filled it again and timed. And it turns out that for the first 8 inches or so, the water was draining at about 3 inches per hour. It was super fast. And then once it got a little bit lower, it slowed down a bit. And that kind of makes sense, because the top level would be more topsoil and compost and things like that. So even though my impression of my yard before I did the digging was that it was all clay and I'm going to have trouble and I may have to dig deeper down and add some additional compost or a drainage system, it doesn't appear to be so. And the reason I give you that long story is when they say do the soil tests, it's really important to figure it out because that's going to help you gauge how big and how deep your garden should be. So this is it. I'll be back there. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me some time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.